Ziggy, if you hear me, take me far, far from here. Quantum Leap.
Welcome, one and all. We are back together this week to discuss Quantum Leap 2022, the revival series, the season finale of the first season, episode 18, entitled Judgment Day. If you are new here or have otherwise forgotten, there will be spoilers ahead, explicitly spoilers for the entire season, as this is the finale. Consider yourself warned. On with the show. Okay, so this has taken me a bit longer to get out because as the season finale, I've had a lot more to think about and a lot more rationalization to do. I'm of two minds right now. Was this a successful season finale for a new show on NBC? I think absolutely yes. If this was a self-contained show that had no prior connections, it built up characters, it built up a storyline, and it successfully, relatively, concluded those storylines and left us with a cliffhanger and left us with a place to go in the future of the show that we know we're getting in season 2. Was this a successful conclusion to a season that has been built up and been built upon the back of the prior Quantum Leap with all of these little interconnected things, all of the characters, the storylines, the potential possibility of interlinking with the Quantum Leap that came before? And I have to say, no, I think it was a big miss on that part. As we know, Scott Bakula originally passed on being included in this show. We also know that we were given a few extra episodes and a season 2. My hunch, my thought was that he had subsequently agreed to be part of the show. Whether or not that was going to be in a full-time capacity or not, I'm not sure. I still believe this may be the case. However, the fact that he was not shown, especially at that very last scene in this episode, where I believe he may have been intended to be shown, leaves some doubt as to whether or not the ink has dried on those contracts or whether or not he is coming back. I have high hopes he may show up in season 2. However, as a self-contained storyline, this one season of television, if you can put aside all of the connections and all of the hopes and all of the dreams and all of the hunches to prior Quantum Leap connections we thought we were getting, I think that this season did not fail. I think it succeeded in what it was trying to do. It was trying to reinvent the leaping process. It was trying to up the ante, try to put a more scientific spin onto the leaps. The characters were built up pretty well. Overall, I think that the leaps, minus a couple, were actually fun to watch. And the characters in the present day setting, while they were rarely given enough to do or rarely given enough interaction with the leap that was going on, they were pretty well handled also. Magic was a legacy character technically, but all of the rest of them were basically new people. Janice came back into the forefront this episode to actually help out, and I think that's another missed opportunity. She was played up early on, dropped for most of the episode, brought back to do almost nothing. I feel like she should have been more fully integrated into the show itself, but those are my thoughts on how this actually wrapped up. Was this a good episode in and of itself? I have a couple of thoughts here as well. So the story was actually pretty good, having Ben leap back into his prior self, being the one that kind of sort of maybe started off the whole situation, leaping into himself before they even began Quantum Leap. They were just kind of starting out before his first date with Addison. All of that stuff helped build these bonds with the characters that we know and we were told were good friends and had this camaraderie, but we never really got to see that except for that very first scene in the first episode. And the whole theme in this episode was we need to work together. We need to come together as a team. We are family, all of that stuff. That's where I feel like they were still playing on the metaphysics of the original series. At the same time, they're trying to throw in this hard sci-fi with the time travel rules, the quantum leap accelerator, Ziggy's AI, which also I feel wasn't wrapped up conclusively in this episode. But I feel like that's something that's going to come down the pike in season 2 if they don't completely switch gears. I also really liked the whole Martinez and Ben, the regressive leaps, I guess you could call them, where they kept leaping backwards from leap to leap into prior leaps where they were both interacting with each other. Martinez also leaps into magic, so this is the leap Ben was originally trying to get to in order to prevent Martinez from killing Addison. He also discovers here, and Martinez came up with a plan, Martinez already knew about this, that it was going to be a one-sided leap. They were destroying the quantum leap accelerator after he leapt here. We also discover in the future that Ian is the only surviving member of the Quantum Leap program in 2051. The world has gone to hell, nuclear winter, all the nations have gone to war. The governments are blaming time travel meddling as the reason for their poor policies, I suppose. So they're using Quantum Leap as a scapegoat, and Ian somehow, some way, is still able to hang out in the Quantum Leap project. So I'm wondering how bad the world actually has gotten. Are there really not many people left alive? We don't have a convoluted storyline as to how Ian is powering the Quantum Leap accelerator, because apparently the way this works is by being slingshotted into the future, you don't belong. So the time stream or the accelerator or Ziggy or whatever you want to call it is actively attempting to pull you back in time to a point where you actually belong. So Ben is in essence fighting for his life to stay in this leap to get as much information from Ian as he can. This was well done because I wasn't entirely sure how they were going to get Ben out of this predicament, how they were going to say, oh, you know what, Ben, you can leap using the solar energy we've stored or whatever. There was no need to send Ben in another leap because he was being pulled backwards in time by the leaping process itself. I liked that. We also discover that Ben leapt into another host. Not revealed who. Ian said it was very difficult to track down another body for Ben to leap into. I have to imagine the person Ben leapt into must have understood the consequences, must have been waiting for this. So is it somebody we should know, or is this somebody we're going to meet later? Ian also at this point gives Ben this new code, I guess, this cheat code, which reminds me a heck of a lot of a thing that happened in Doctor Who. It's a similar situation here where Ian, of different points in time, has to activate this code, put in this cheat code simultaneously, which is a bit wonky. I do like the way they do this, but it was handled a little too cheesily for me. Ian had to come together with all of the other versions of Ian. The original version, the future version, the present day version, they all had to input this code simultaneously. How that works outside of linear time, I'm not certain. Doesn't that mean I'm inputting the code now and it doesn't matter if someone in the future is putting it in at the same time because time is already moved on from them? I've already done it. So any point in the future, if they put in that code, it's already been put in by me. I'm not going to go on too much here because temporal mechanics are convoluted to say the least. But that was a little iffy, but I did like how they played it. The whole friendship angle and believing in yourself was a little much, but that's obviously the type of thing they wanted to tell, so I'm not going to ding that too much. Ben and Martinez leap back from the 2018, I believe, time period to all of the leaps they have met each other in prior. So they start out in the old West Town, which means that's the final leap. What I am not entirely certain here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but does this undo all of those leaps? I'm not saying it undoes any of the leaps Ben took part in outside of the ones with Martinez, but since they were regressing through leaps. So let's say they went back to the shock theater or the insane asylum one. They fought in the insane asylum and then leapt backwards prior to the leap they had been in before that. Does that now make all of the situation that was done in that insane asylum episode null and void because they've just overwritten it with these new series of events? And does that mean they've just set wrong what they once set right? I don't know if the series wanted us to look too deeply into this, if there's going to be ramifications or implications of this going forward, but that is something that I would absolutely prefer they follow up on, because it seems like they just kind of unwrote half of the season, and there could be some potentially dire consequences from this. Martinez also here was seemingly killed by one of the people in that first leap where they met. I can't remember the character's name, but one of the women that Ben met during that first Old West leap, she killed Martinez. He absolutely looked dead. Is this going to hold true? I don't necessarily think so, but we have no resolution on this. So is Martinez potentially now trapped in time? Kind of like an unstuck man. If you remember Sliders, there was somebody who was constantly being bounced around between worlds. Basically, in a similar manner, I'm thinking might happen to Martinez here. Or is Martinez going to be returned to a prior state? Or, stay with me here, at the end of the episode, it appears that Ben is finally leaping home. I don't believe this is the case. It was left as a cliffhanger. The quantum leap accelerator started lighting up. Somebody was coming through. I personally thought, for whatever reason, that was going to be Scott Bakula as Sam returning. If that's the implication, perhaps they're still negotiating his season 2 return. I don't personally think it's actually going to be Ben. However, if it does turn out to be Ben, that could turn everything on its head, because then next season we could have a complete reset. We could have a new leaper, a new set of circumstances, all of that stuff. So that would actually be fantastic as well. Could the returner actually be Martinez, or heck, could it be another version of one of our characters kind of coming in from an alternate side timeline to tell them, oh crap, we screwed up, we need to fix everything in season 2. Those are my thoughts on who or what that leaper may be that's incoming, assuming they don't completely scrap everything and start over in season 2. So it was also nice to see a leap taken in a couple different attempts. So we saw Ben's initial reaction to leaping into himself in 2018, trying to change the timeline to save Addison. That didn't work out, so he leapt back and tried again. And I did like this little reset. I like to see him get the ability to try things over. That happened a couple times in the original, and it's kind of similar to the time loop episode, which turned out not to be a time loop, except there he was leaping into different people. Here he was leaping into himself and basically getting a do-over. There were some things that really didn't flesh out well to me, like I've already mentioned, the over-reliance on the love conquers all situation with finding your inner self and believing in your friends and your family. I understand that's a trope. I understand that's where they wanted to go with it. Overall, what were your thoughts on this episode, and specifically, what did you think of the season as a whole? I think that the show definitely has a lot of potential, but there were a lot of downsides, which I'm very much hoping they can address and round off those edges in season 2, especially if they're going to turn a corner and try to do a completely different storyline. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about them going back to this well and addressing future Ian. I'm kind of hoping that that has been overwritten now and we don't have to deal with the apocalypse anymore, but now we might have to go deal with the government oversight committee coming in to take over things. Martinez finally actually in real world time being put in charge of the program, and maybe that senator coming back, as well as hopefully addressing Sam a bit more. But if they're going to steer away from that because of Scott Bakula, I understand. I will be disappointed. If the show's truly trying to invent its own identity, I think it needs to make a more clear break from the original canon and try to do its own thing without wink wink nudge nudge references back to that original series as much as they did in season 1. I'm going to say this was a fun watch, and it's definitely worth checking out the season if you haven't seen it. There are a few episodes you could skip, but once it's bingeable, I have a feeling it'll feel a bit more complete and a bit better. Write all those things you want in the comments below. Leave a like, do a share, hit subscribe, ring the bell. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore, but until next time...
Ziggy! Lead me far, far from here.